Hello, friends. Welcome. Welcome to this special live meditation with Eckhart Tolle. The world needs you as a teacher of presence. And from my perspective, that's a very true statement. A teacher of presence, someone who is grounded in being and knows that their most important purpose in any given moment, in any interaction, is the state of their being, the state of their attention, the state of our here-ness, our now-ness, our total presence, becoming teachers of presence at a time when the world is experiencing such a feeling and a sense of accelerated turbulence, my language for it. Sounds true, and Eckhart teachings are working together, and we've created a new School of Awakening 5-month program. It's called Becoming a Teacher of Presence, and it begins on May 21st. And many of the themes that Eckhart touches on and will touch on in this live global meditation about how the world needs you to become a teacher of presence are what we're exploring in this 5-month online deep dive immersion program. It begins with a virtual retreat that will be broadcast from Lake Louise, and then it's followed by a 5-month robust community journey that we have the opportunity to take together. And if you're interested in learning more, if you're on the player page, you'll see a Learn More button. And if you're on YouTube, you can look for the notes in the description. You can click to learn more about becoming a teacher of presence. The final registration date is May 16th. Now, as we move into this global live meditation together here with Eckhart, this is an invitation for us to deepen presence as a practicing community. It's an invitation to how we listen, how we receive right now. And that also includes how we might potentially relate or not relate to the comments function that is available both on the player page and on YouTube. You may choose to not engage in the comments at all if you feel and sense that it increases your ability to be part of our practicing, deepening presence community, perhaps by not engaging in the comments at all. Or if you do, deepening presence, and as you comment or read comments, do it with a full sense, grounded in being. And with that, here's Eckhart Tolle on The World Needs You as a Teacher of Presence.
Thank you, Tammy. Welcome to our live meditation session. I will probably be talking for most of the time, but there may be quite a few gaps of stillness in between the words, as they are now. And these gaps are very important. I would even say more important than the words. If you become conscious of these gaps of stillness, in between words. You notice the gaps instead of just impatiently being in your conceptual mind and saying, why is he talking so slowly? Why hasn't he said anything significant yet? If you are able to notice the gaps, give them attention, that is the arising of that state of consciousness that we call presence. It is a state of alertness, relaxed alertness, clarity, a state in which the conceptual mind has come to a rest and something else arises. Thinking is most people's normal state of when they are awake in conventional terms. And when you become aware of these gaps, thinking subsides and presence, or we call it awareness, arises. Thinking subsides, presence arises. Of course, thinking will come back, but it has briefly, momentarily subsided. Something else has emerged. And that is what we call presence. It is a state of, one could say, pure awareness or pure consciousness. So that is what sometimes people hope to achieve in when they actually do formal meditations. A meditation is a good tool, but it's not enough. It's not even for everybody. The most important thing is to bring that state of clear, alert presence into everyday life. Then the way in which you interact with other people, the way in which you perceive the world, respond to situations, is very different from the way in which you would habitually react to situations if you were completely identified with the conceptual mind. That's the egoic state, complete identification with the conditioned mind, conditioned by the past. That's the ego, identification with that. It's vital for us to go beyond that state of consciousness, that egoic state of consciousness, because it creates a lot of suffering in the world, a lot of trouble. You create suffering for yourself, you create suffering for others. It operates on an individual level, it operates on a collective level. It is to a large extent, a dysfunctional state of consciousness. It had its purpose, we had to go through it. But now we need to emerge out of it to the next stage in human evolution. If we get, this is a very critical transition from the egoic state of consciousness to a more enlightened state, an awakened state. Almost all the problems that we are facing, both on an individual and collective level, arise from the human mind. The greatest danger humanity is facing does not come from without, it comes from within the human mind. And the havoc that the egoic state creates in the world. So the danger comes from within. So this is presence. In that state of presence, who you are or who you perceive to yourself to be shifts from deriving your sense of self, your sense of identity, from a narrative in your mind, which you call my life. That's the normal egoic state. You derive your identity from the movement of thought in your mind. It tells you the story of me. You call it my life. That is the deriving your identity from the stream of thinking, ultimately. Me, what's going to happen to me? And then there's all the past that has created that me. The past that has created me. But it's in ancient spiritual teachings such as Buddhism, that's called a fiction. It's a mentally created fiction that becomes your personality, your person, your sense of self. That has certain characteristics that are dysfunctional. For example, it needs conflict, it loves conflict. It says, I seek peace, but it acts out conflict. It loves enemies because it defines itself through the other. It demonizes the other, it criticizes the other, it judges the other, it makes the other as possible in order to strengthen its own fictitious sense of identity, that is the ego. That is what we need to go beyond. Entire nations can do it to other nations too. So your identity then is no longer derived from this narrative, this ultimate mental fiction. Your identity comes from a deeper place, the place of beingness or presence. And at first it seems perhaps a little disconcerting, because when you're not involved in conceptual thinking, who are you? When you don't remember your past, or at least don't derive your identity from your past, who am I without that? In this space of stillness, of alert presence, alert, relaxed presence, who am I? You are that sense of beingness or presence that has no form. It is just the light of consciousness itself. So what's left of you is a sense of aliveness, of beingness, of presence. Stillness, but alive stillness. And that is your deeper identity. I call it your essence identity. So connecting with that essence identity is the vital step of transcending the egoic identity. And then you can feel that this presence is not just an absence of thought or an absence of sounds. The stillness is not just an absence, but it is a very powerful sense of presence. There's an enormous power in that stillness that is in every human. It's already there, potentially underneath the stream of thinking, so to speak, like a vastness of the ocean underneath the turbulent surface of the ocean. There's the vastness of the ocean underneath the turbulent waves on the surface, which is the stream of thinking. So they're not separate. The consciousness that you are is also your thoughts. It's not, your thoughts are not separate. They are a manifestation of form that this consciousness takes, but it's only a surface phenomenon. The consciousness itself is far deeper than any thoughts in your mind or even any emotions. There is a depth to who you are that is unfathomable. When I say you, that connects you with something much vaster than what you normally call you. I don't want to give it any name right now, but it connects you to a vastness that you are an expression of. But if you don't know that, then you live like a fragment, disconnected from other fragments in this world. And then, as you get little tastes of that state of consciousness that we call presence, for example, now, you feel yourself, you feel your presence right now, beyond any beyond any thought that's connected with your life situation or whatever it may be, whether what age you are becomes irrelevant, what gender you are becomes irrelevant, what you have achieved or suffered in this world. It transcends all that. It is more powerful than any of that. It liberates you from all that. It's not that the person disappears completely. Of course, the personal self is still there. It continues to operate in this world. But there's a continuous knowing that there is more to you than that. And that is vital. So you continue to operate as a person in this world, but no longer deriving your identity from the personal sense of self. You can operate as a person, you need to in this world of time, past and future. You can operate in this world without losing yourself in this world and without losing yourself in identity that ultimately is a very shallow and fleeting thing that you call me, the person. So that thing continues to operate for a while, but your challenge is, while you operate in this world as a person, not to lose connectedness with that deeper dimension. And that is bringing presence into every situation that you deal with, every interaction in this world. And that is a skill. That skill develops and it is acquired. Presence itself is timeless, but it is a skill for you to, it requires some practice, a high degree of alertness to bring presence into everyday life, whatever you do here, whatever function you have in this world, function and for example, not to confuse your function with your identity. It's a function. I am a teacher of presence. You are a teacher of presence, or you are becoming a teacher of presence by living in that way, by bringing that consciousness into every situation, so that you don't lose yourself in the doing of whatever it is you're doing in the situation, and you don't lose yourself in a sense of identity that's to do with your function, and to reduce other people to their function in this world. So when you talk to somebody, in whatever purpose the interaction has, let's say it's a very simple thing. It's you're in a restaurant and you order a meal, or you are the server in the restaurant and you're talking to the customer. Is all there is to this interaction the customer talking to the server, or is there some presence there that causes the interaction to be deeper and more meaningful than just a customer talking to a server? That you reduce yourself and you reduce the others to some temporary function. And so you lose your sense of the humanity in the deepest sense of the other, because you have reduced the other to a mental concept. And you are relating to the mental concept. This is the waiter, the waitress, the server. And even by doing it to another, you do it to yourself also. You've reduced yourself to in that particular situation. You are the client, the customer, or it could be any situation. So what's the difference then when you bring presence into that moment? In that moment, you may still be talking. There's a menu, you're looking at the menu. I would like a minestrone soup. And you're looking at the server. And yes, all that functions in the normal way. But while you order this meal, I'm giving just one example out of hundreds of thousands. While you order the meal, you can sense what I've been pointing at right in our session today. You can sense within yourself this presence underneath the thinking. In other words, I could say there's a space of stillness right behind the thinking, and you're aware of it. And that's you. That's your presence. And the word, you speak the words, and then you listen to or you look at the other person, and you can sense the same dimension of consciousness in the other. The other also is essentially that presence. The other also is essentially that consciousness that is the essence of who or what you are. So you sense the consciousness of the other through sensing the consciousness within yourself beyond the personal selfhood. And that brings an added vital dimension into the interaction. And it's not something that perhaps is immediately noticed by the other. The waiter may not notice that you can sense his or her being. However, the server in this particular example, it's possible that he or she may be so absorbed in their mind that it just does not penetrate. But it's also possible that there were response, and the person that you are connecting with at this deeper level, not through words, just sensing his or her presence, or some other pronoun. You have to be careful with pronouns these days. So it doesn't matter which one. You sense their presence. And it may well be that you get a response. So the person may suddenly feel so good about you, doesn't know why. Because everybody, deep down, they love being recognized in their beingness beyond their personality. There's an unconscious longing in humans to connect with a deeper level that is beyond the person, the personality. There's an unconscious longing in every human being to become free of being trapped in that personality, the person. They want to be free. They don't know that, but they feel, I can't stand it anymore. So they go to drugs or some other things just to have a moment of freedom from themselves, so to speak, but it doesn't last. And not only that, they fall below the normal state of consciousness instead of rising above the normal state of consciousness. You don't want to free yourself from yourself by moving towards sleep or unconsciousness. That's happened with many drugs. For a while, they make you feel better. Feel so relaxed. It's so good. You can't think about your problems anymore. So how wonderful. And then, of course, you come back and you haven't risen above thought. You haven't risen above the ego. You have fallen below the ego. Yes, it's been a moment of freedom, but it didn't last. And it is not our purpose to go that way. Our purpose is to rise above, to transcend the egoic self, so that your identity increasingly is derived from that beautiful sense of presence or beingness, and not the story of you. And so you become a teacher of presence by, in a wider sense, by bringing this state of consciousness into every interaction. Teaching itself can be interpreted in different ways. Teaching is usually, one thinks of teaching as imparting information. A teacher gives information, facts, or teaching can be teaching somebody how to acquire a skill, how to do this or how to do that. Teaching presence could involve words. In certain situations, it can be very helpful to say something to a person if the situation is right. Maybe I'll come back to that a little later, to say something, but more than words, a teacher of presence endeavors to bring presence into every situation in life. Not just, this obviously applies to people who have helping professions, people in helping professions, psychotherapists, doctors, nurses, teachers, social workers, body workers, people who have in close contact with other humans in helping professions. Some of them already in some way, without knowing it, bringing presence into what they do. But not others are just stressed and can't. It becomes. It's so hard. Many teachers are stressed, doctors are stressed, nurses are stressed, social workers are stressed, Not everybody. I was, for the first time in my life, I was in a patient in a hospital last year, and so I experienced the nurses, primarily more contact, obviously, with nurses than with doctors. And some nurses seem quite stressed and they're doing their job, but it's tough. And I've seen a couple of others were actually bringing presence, and they probably they've never heard of the word presence. They just, something has arisen in them naturally and spontaneously when they relate to people. You're not just to them, particularly two I found that I had contact with, you are more to them than a patient. Again, they don't reduce you to a conceptual identity called patient. And you can sense that they relate to you as a being, a human being. And so that without perhaps knowing it, without having a word for it, spontaneously in the course of their work, some presence has already arisen, and that's beautiful. And this may be the case with many of you also, that already in your whatever work you do, there's already that dimension coming in, perhaps not all the time, but already you are able to bring that dimension in. Or perhaps a better way of putting it is to say you are allowing that dimension to come in. Because when I say you are able to bring that dimension in, that seems to imply that you need to do something. And that's not quite it. It's not that you need to do something to the other. It's allowing the presence to flow through you. It's not a doing as such. You have to be careful that in any situation, the ego can come back in. So, for example, when we say, I become a teacher of presence, whenever you use words referring to yourself through words, it's dangerous. Because when you say, I'm a teacher of presence, and not realizing that it's only a function, but it's not an identity. It's a function. And it could easily happen that you create another conceptual identity of, I am a teacher of presence. You have another conceptual identity. And then you compare yourself to others, which is what the egoic self does. And then you say, okay, I will show you the path. Just listen to me. Ego comes in very easily through the back door. So being a teacher of presence is a function. It's not an identity. Your identity is presence itself. Your identity is consciousness itself. And so, as I said, some people, especially in helping professions, some are already bringing some presence into what they do without having a word for it. And if they do it more consciously, this can deepen. But it doesn't have to be just the helping professions, because anybody who has contact with other human beings in their work, you may be a hairdresser, you may be a flight attendant, you may be a realtor, a lawyer. There are incredible opportunities because you're relating to others. Of course, it's important there to differentiate between the function that you have on the level of your conceptual interaction and the deeper transcendent consciousness that can flow into that. Some people have very difficult jobs with other people. For example, lawyers, for example. Lawyers tend to come into contact with their so-called clients with other human beings when they are at their most unconscious, because lawyers tend to come into contact with people involved in some kind of conflict with others. And often divorce lawyers, for example. So if you're a divorce lawyer, you're more likely to encounter people at their most unconscious. And they may be, in other situations, they may be significantly more conscious than in the situation into which you encounter them if you're a lawyer. So this is an even greater challenge for you to stay conscious there, because you typically will encounter other humans at their most unconscious. And so a lawyer, for example, needs to be really intensely present. It's a huge challenge, but also a wonderful challenge if you can live up to that challenge and bring presence into the interactions. But even in professions like a realtor, maybe not quite as bad as lawyer, but when people are involved in signing contracts, and because they become reactive and they become aggressive, and the ego comes in. So again, being a realtor is also maybe not quite as challenging as being a lawyer, but can be challenging too. All kinds of jobs. Flight attendants these days, very challenging jobs. It used to be relatively easy, but now humans have become so toxic in many ways, so unconscious to the various challenges they encounter, collective challenges and others. So that can be a very challenging job too. And again, here, wonderful opportunity for bringing presence. And again, I have encountered some flight attendants on my frequent travels who are able to bring that presence, who give you attention beyond reducing yourself to a passenger, which is a conceptual identity. They don't reduce yourself, they relate to you as a human being. And some do it, and others don't quite manage it. And so this is a skill that is vital. The challenges that you encounter in relating to other human beings is exactly what is needed for you to strengthen the arising presence. If you were not challenged, you could meditate every day and it's fine, you feel quite good. And you think, okay, I'm present. But the moment a real challenge comes, the presence is, you're not deeply enough connected with that dimension, and then you lose it again. The difficulties that you encounter, your challenge with other human beings, are perhaps the most important ingredient in the arising of presence. You need the challenges. And you may have noticed that many of your challenges, of course, some are physical challenges, all kinds, financial challenges, all kinds of living situation challenges, but many of your challenges, or you could say your suffering, comes from other human beings. Because humans can be so difficult. But that for most, there may be a few humans here and there whose spiritual path is to be a hermit, to withdraw from life, to live out in nature. There are a few whose destiny is to be not very much in contact with other humans. But most of us, our spiritual path is through relationships with others. We evolve. through, and we no longer demand that other humans should be more conscious. We realized that what matters is your state of consciousness, not the other person's state of consciousness. So this is very vital to be able to hold presence in challenging situations, and life is full of them, fortunately, because you need them. Holding challenges, holding presence in challenging situations. So whenever a challenge happens, small or big, always realize in any situation, the most important thing is not what's happening. The most important thing in any situation is the state of consciousness with which you meet what's happening. This is easy to forget. People always think the situation that I'm dealing with right now is the most important thing. This is really important. Its importance is secondary. The really important thing is with what state of consciousness are you facing that situation? What state of consciousness do you bring to this situation? And so if you can reorient, so to speak, yourself and remind yourself continuously, the moment a challenge happens, be aware of your state of consciousness. That is primary. The situation is always secondary. And the state of consciousness needs to be one of non-reactivity. Reactivity comes from the egoic self that says, you shouldn't behave like that, this shouldn't be happening, this is wrong, that mustn't be, I don't want to be here, I want to be somewhere else. It's always opposition to what is, reactive, and in presence, you respond to situations if a response is called for, but you don't react. React comes from the conditioning of your mind. So you react in the old, predictable way. And then you recreate situations through your reactions. Because in the way in which you react to a situation, that then determines to a large extent how this situation develops. Does it get worse or does it get better? So many people amplify conflict. Just a challenge comes into their life, some small conflict, they unconsciously react, and the reaction amplifies the conflict and then it gets bigger. And the other person who perhaps caused the conflict gets even more unconscious, and they get even more reactive. And so this is all part of the old egoic consciousness, where very often it's not the situation that's so bad, your reaction makes the situation so bad. And it blows it up. And that's karma, one could say. It's a karmic reaction. Karma, by the way, means action. And karma is the law of action and reaction. So any unconscious human being, you meet a person who is angry at you for some reason, are you angry immediately in turn? Do you react with anger too, which is a normal thing for humans? One person is angry, you accuses you of something, and you immediately. Instead, in any situation, my state of consciousness right now is what matters. Are you able to just observe and be present, bring that relaxed clarity to the situation instead of amplifying it? And that determines what happens in the future. So it also collectively, it applies also when we have a collective problem. How do we deal with the collective problem through presence or through reactivity. And if we deal through, by the way, when you deal with something through presence, it means there's wisdom. This is another important word. Wisdom arises out of presence. Wisdom is different from intelligence. Intelligence is the ability to use the conceptual mind. That has its purpose, it's fine. But there is something deeper and more important potentially in every human being, and that's not intelligence, it's wisdom. Wisdom is this faculty that arises out of presence, and then you can deal with situations truly intelligently rather than reactively. And you do not make the situation worse by your reaction to the situation. So you need wisdom. What the world needs is not more intelligence. Very soon, AI is probably becoming more intelligent than humans. And the human challenge is to access the dimension where wisdom arises. That's computers don't have that. They can be very good at thinking, probably. They're making incredible advances, but not wisdom. Wisdom, so we need to, as we are being almost replaced by artificial thinkers, this coincides with the transition of human beings to a higher state of consciousness than thinking, where, of course, they can still think, but they are not trapped in thinking. And so it's terribly important. And again, coming back for a moment to that situation, collective situation, there's a collective challenge. We had the pandemic situation as a huge collective challenge. Was there wisdom in the way in which we reacted to that challenge? Not very much. There was a lot of fear, there was a lot of panic, there was a lot of anger, and many measures were taken, not necessarily seeing all the possible repercussions of measures that were taken that will still play themselves out in the next few years. We don't need to go into details. But the question is always, do you create more suffering by your reaction to a situation than is contained in the situation itself? That's lack of wisdom does that. And lack of wisdom means lack of presence or awareness, whatever word you want to use. So using life situations, all the life situations that arise in your life become your spiritual practice. When you realize it's not the situation that's the most important thing, it's my state of consciousness that's the most important thing, and give your attention to that. At this moment, it may be relatively easy to be present, or not. Maybe you're challenged, maybe not by some external situation, but maybe you're challenged by your mind. If you're not challenged by some external situation, like you're in bed, it's 2:30 in the morning and you wake up or you couldn't go to sleep, and dreadful things are happening in your mind. Oh my God. You're not challenged by any external situation because it's a warm bed and you're fine in the now, but you're challenged by your mind. So many times The challenge may not come from external situation, but from your mind. And ultimately, everything comes from your mind in a deeper sense. Because every event becomes a mental thing. You experience it as a mental event. Anything in the external world is recreated in your mind. It becomes a mental event. So everything is ultimately your mind. So when you encounter a difficult situation and you don't react in the usual old way, but you stay present and you look, see the situation, then there's presence arising. It's a difficult person and you don't react in the old predictable way. Your lack of reaction is a teaching also. I have sometimes found when people were difficult, no matter various situations, difficult people, angry people, accusing, or just being in a bad mood, and when you don't react, they get very disconcerted, like, because they need the reaction. The egoic self or their pain body needs the reaction. And if you don't react, they become a little confused, and then the whole thing collapses. Even a little thing, as in traffic, for some reason, traffic makes people very unconscious too when they're driving. And they get angry at other cars, other drivers. They don't know them. They get angry. It's very strange. So they personalize all that. And occasionally I found people got angry at me. I'm sometimes maybe a bit slow in driving, and then they shout something, and then I look at them. They expect, please shout something back, almost unconsciously. They expect to, but I could see this. It was pointless to react. What is the point in shouting something back? There's no point whatsoever. So I just looked. And some thought I was deaf, and they shouted louder. But the situation very quickly collapses if it's not being fed, it's not being reinforced. Many conflict situations, if you deal with it only factually, take the ego out of it, which is the reactivity, presence then arises. And presence arises, you can deal with the situation factually. What can we do here? This, that, or maybe nothing. Then very quickly, a situation that potentially could have become enormous conflict-ridden and gone on and on, begins to dissolve. So as a teacher of presence in a wider sense, a lot of the time, your teaching is dissolving conflict, not avoiding conflict or anything. It's nothing to do with that, but dissolving conflict through non-reactivity and not bringing a self into it. You stop complaining about other people, for example, when they don't do what they're supposed to do, which happens a lot. Or they do something that they're not supposed to do, which happens a lot too. And so you don't bring... an important thing that a teacher of presence does is they dissolve conflict. They don't feed it. And if you don't feed it, it very quickly collapses. Now, if conflict collapses, that's not food for your ego. So your ego does not want conflict to collapse. It might say that it wants a peace, but it acts differently. The words say, I want peace. No, they don't want, the ego doesn't want peace. It wants more conflict. So when you are present, you're able to dissolve conflict, and that it is simultaneously, it is a dissolution of your ego too. Because the ego wants the conflict, but you don't. You, the essential you, the you that is transcendent to the ego, does not want conflict. It loves peace. It loves the state of love. So the teacher of presence teaches, not very often, a lot of the time, not through words, not even necessarily through doing, but through bringing a certain state of consciousness to the situation. And that dissolves conflict. Imagine if that happens on a world scale. If there were world leaders conscious enough, present enough to dissolve conflict instead of amplifying conflict. Because what happens on an individual level also happens collectively. The amplification of conflict. That's how, for example, if you know the history of century, First World War, it started with one little thing, tragic for the person, but the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand, whoever his name was, somewhere in the Balkans. And then various nations, the leaders of nations reacted. And it became bigger and bigger. It's just one event reaction, and the others reacted against their reaction. Before they know it, you have the most unbelievable, devastating conflict that ever happened on the planet until then. It's like 30 million dead or something, just unbelievable. It all happened from one little thing. Unconscious people amplifying conflict at every stage. And this could happen again. To some extent, it is happening again in the world, because not many leaders are present or conscious. Very few. Let me see, who is trying to think of a conscious leader? It's not coming to me right now, but there must be someone. So all these things are vitally, vitally important. And even just this one little thing of not contributing to conflict, but dissolving conflict would change the world. First, it changes your life, and if people who have a certain amount of power are able to practice that, then it's the end of useless warfare and terrible suffering that humans create for other humans and for themselves. So that's the path. Our path is the path of awakening to presence. So important. It's never been more important than it is now, if you consider the world situation. But the true change starts with you, and then it spreads from you to others. Thank you. Thank you.